I came back from lunch and caught HR digging through my desk like raccoons in a dumpster behind a Vegas motel. They jumped like they'd seen a ghost. Stapler halfway out of the drawer, my spare flats in one hand, and a folder marked "Do Not Modify" on full display like it was some kind of damn treasure map. One of them tried to look casual, cleared his throat, and muttered, "Routine inspection." Sure. And I'm a Girl Scout on cookie duty. The thing is, I'd seen this coming 3 weeks ago. You don't spend 7 years running the quiet side of risk compliance without picking up on patterns, especially when people think you're just another cubicle ghost. And the last 3 weeks had smelled like rot, over-friendly questions, accidental requests for admin credentials, Marcus's sudden interest in my audit architecture. It didn't take a psychic, and yet I'd played along, like a woman sipping her coffee while the dam cracks. By the way, before I go any further, if you're the kind of person who's been burned at work or knows what it feels like to be underestimated, do me one favor, hit that subscribe button and like the video. Most people listen and scroll on, but it means the world to the team. Thanks. Now, back to the part where HR tried to mug my peace of mind. I didn't say a word. Just walked slowly to my chair and stood beside it, watching them rifle through my life like they'd find a smoking gun or a damning post-it. The silence got heavy. One of them finally set the folder down, like it was too hot to touch. "Again," I said, smiling tightly. "Find anything interesting?" Neither of them answered, just exchanged looks with each other and then with Marcus, who was suddenly nowhere to be found. Typical. Now, they didn't know what I knew, that the moment someone accessed my laptop with local admin privileges without my biometric key, a silent alarm would trip. Not loud, not flashy. Just a small red blink on my screen and a quiet ping to a secondary vault. That vault contained mirrored backups of every compliance log, every change, every move tied to the systems I'd been assigned to. And that folder they had their grubby fingers all over, the one labeled "Do Not Modify Escrow Audit Chain," that was bait. A time-stamped, notarized record signed by the founder himself, granting my LLC full custodianship over the company's compliance infrastructure. In other words, they weren't just snooping. They just tripped a contractually bound tripwire that made their little treasure hunt a breach. The 3 coworkers who'd been loitering nearby tried to act like they hadn't been watching this whole circus unfold. But I saw Lisa, always just a little too chatty at the coffee machine, whisper something to Gary, who nodded like he'd just won something. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a routine inspection. This was a hit job, coordinated, possibly even ordered. And judging by the terrified way HR was backing off my desk now, they hadn't been told what they were walking into. I sat down slowly and logged into my terminal. The system greeted me normally, then immediately flagged that earlier an unauthorized access attempt had been made from my machine, tied to an internal HR credential. Sloppy, like trying to rob a bank using your own debit card. I tapped a few keys. The interface pulled up the real-time activity report. Multiple access requests, deep folders, attempted deletions, and when I dug deeper, I found the trail. Marcus's ID, then Lisa's, then rerouted under an HR guest credential, so now it was a party. I clicked one final command. Escrow lock, initiate pre-breach archive. The screen flickered once, then settled. Let them keep looking. Let them pretend it was routine. They just stepped into a minefield wrapped in protocol and signed in triplicate. And the worst part? They didn't even know what they were looking for, but I did. And I'd made sure they'd choke on it. The guy with the thinning hair and a tie that still had a clearance sticker on it looked up at me like a deer caught hot-wiring a patrol car. "Routine inspection," he repeated, this time quieter. "Nothing personal." I didn't blink, just nodded slowly, like I was hearing weather reports. Funny thing about "nothing personal" in corporate language, it always means they've already decided to take something from you and want you to thank them for the favor. But I wasn't raised to smile through theft. I was raised to keep records. Every single one. I looked over their heads, past the glass, and caught Marcus in the reflection of the break room fridge. He was pretending to get water, watching with that hungry little twitch in his jaw, the same one he had after I got top scores in the last internal review cycle while his team initiatives flopped like a fish on a dry dock. That man had been circling me like a crow since they brought in the new VP of Ops and whispered about streamlining legacy personnel. I wasn't legacy. I was the engine buried under everyone else's dashboard. But people like Marcus, they don't want to drive, they just want your keys. So, no, it wasn't random, it was a setup. And these two HR paper pushers were the errand boys. They were still pawing through drawers when one of them yanked out the folder. Glossy black, tabbed, sealed with a red corner label. Do not modify, escrow audit chain. They froze like they'd just unearthed a live grenade, which technically wasn't far off. Inside that folder, a notarized agreement with the original letterhead from the company's founder, back when they still wore denim to board meetings and knew what the hell their infrastructure actually did. It outlined in clean, bold legal type, my firm, Marlin Advisory Group LLC, retained custodianship over the full compliance infrastructure. Data access, logging, encryption schema, all of it routed through my framework. All of it protected under third-party custodial agreement. Escrow-backed, arbitration-proof. And best of all, it had teeth. They didn't get that far. They just stared at the first page like it was cursed, probably because none of them had ever actually read a vendor governance clause in their lives. They just clicked accept during onboarding and assumed their titles made them immortal. I reached for the folder slowly, like I might pet a wild animal. You sure you want to keep flipping through that? I asked, calm as lake water. You're in breach of 2 signature-level custodial clauses just having it open. The shorter one looked at his partner, then gently closed it, like it might hiss. That's when Lisa suddenly got real interested in a half-dead office plant by the window. Her hand twitched toward her phone, probably to warn Marcus that the plan was unraveling. But it was too late. Because the second they touched my folder, the secondary audit logs triggered a cascade flag, pushing a silent notification to both our external regulatory partner and to the legal hold branch of our cyber liability insurer. That system had only ever activated twice in 7 years. This was the third. I leaned back in my chair and tapped my keyboard. The red indicator blinked again. 3 attempted login breaches today. All internal, all sloppy. I opened my encrypted vault and added a note to the chain. Unauthorized HR review of custodial agreement folder. Witnessed, recorded, system flags tripped, legal visibility engaged. Then I made eye contact with the taller HR guy. Next time you get sent to dig through someone's workspace, I said, voice level, make sure they don't own the vault you're standing in. He paled. The shorter one stammered, We didn't know this was protected. We were told you were replaceable, I finished. They didn't answer, didn't need to, because in a building full of people who believed silence meant weakness, they'd just learned mine was the kind that echoes in courtrooms. At 7:43 a.m., my phone buzzed. Not a call. A system alert, low priority ping like the kind I'd configured to only activate when someone tampered with permissions they didn't understand. I glanced at the message, blinked once, and smiled into my coffee. They'd locked me out. I didn't panic. I didn't even swear. I just reached into the cabinet behind my dining table, opened my little brushed steel safe, and held the key Marcus didn't know existed, literally and legally. See, he'd filed a report that morning. Data irregularities, possible policy breach. I imagined him hunched over his keyboard like a little league umpire calling strikes on a rain delay. His words were all implication, no proof. But HR loves that language. Legal doesn't. Which is why legal, bless their souls, responded 2 hours later with one very calm, very damning question. Can you verify ownership of the escrow-linked systems before further action? They could not, because both primary audit tokens, the cryptographic keys that authorize internal access to compliance logs and system trails, lived outside their control. One in the palm of my hand, the other zipped inside a locked drawer at the office of our external regulatory liaison, whose last email had read, "Your firm continues to meet and exceed governance expectations. Please alert us to any access changes immediately." And now there had been a change. Oh, had there ever. They thought by locking me out, they were removing a threat. What they actually did was activate Clause 7.4b of my agreement. The clause none of them had read, because Marcus had a habit of skipping everything after the first page of a contract. That clause didn't just protect me, it transferred. Upon revocation of physical access without board clearance, it stated, data oversight transfers solely to the vendor until such time as the board of directors reviews and unanimously approves restoration under vendor supervision. Translation. The second they revoked my access without a board vote, they handed me the wheel, legally, automatically, irreversibly. I didn't need revenge. I had mechanism. By 12:12 p.m., the internal risk dashboard turned crimson across 6 categories. Every attempt to pull archived audit trails returned the same error. Access requires vendor escrow authorization. They tried restoring backups. No dice. My compliance framework was built to detect tampering. If a rollback request wasn't properly timestamped and notarized, the system shut down the trail and triggered forensic lockdown protocols, which it had, flawlessly. I imagined Marcus sitting in the conference room, sweat gathering behind his ears while the new VP of Ops tried to hold his tantrum inside. I could practically hear the chairs shifting as people realized they couldn't even open last quarter's attestation reports. The IT department sent out a company-wide message at 2:03 p.m. We are experiencing an unexpected service degradation in legacy compliance logging systems. Please refrain from attempting manual restorations. A vendor protocol review is underway. They didn't mention my name, but they didn't have to, because when the lights go out in the archive room, the only person they remember is the one who installed the switch. I put the audit token back in my safe, finished my coffee, and opened a clean notepad. If they wanted the systems back, there'd be terms. Strict ones. Because once you trigger a system like mine, you don't reset it with an apology. You renegotiate with paperwork. Thursday's audit prep meeting should have lasted 20 minutes. It stretched past 90 with no end in sight. The new compliance analyst, Jenna, fresh from a Big Four firm and still believing structure solved everything, raised her hand and asked, "Can someone point me to the latest document chain location?" Nobody spoke. The director of finance, his tie already loosened, glanced at the projector. The file tree showed nothing but red icons. The archived compliance logs, empty. The system logs, normally running on a mirrored auto-update basis, had been wiped clean. Not deleted, just out of reach. Jenna tapped again. Okay, then what about the quarterly attestation reports? Q1 and Q2. Still silence. Someone from the HR side fumbled with their tablet, tried to connect to the archive server. Same error, access denied, vendor oversight required. I imagine that's when the panic started to bloom behind the eyes of people who had never in their lives read the fine print of a custodial agreement. They'd grown comfortable thinking control lived in titles, desks, swipe access. They never considered that true control is what survives a lockout. At 10:46 a.m., I'd filed a support ticket with the subject line that said it all. Urgent. Escrow system locked us out. Can't even read backups. I know that because someone forwarded it to me, sloppily. CC'd instead of BCC'd. Probably meant to loop me in as external vendor support while pretending they still had a grip on things. I didn't reply. The email sat there, unread. And that silence? It hit harder than any message I could have sent. By noon, 2 directors had tried to call me, one from finance, one from risk. I let them ring out. Then blocked both. Because here's what they didn't understand. Once they tampered with the node security layer, my node, which I had warned Marcus not to experiment with, the escrow system kicked into protection mode. It didn't just shut the doors, it rekeyed them, which meant any internal credential, even from a VP, no longer had the authority to even view the structure, let alone edit or recover it. The documents were still there, secure, untouched. But as far as the company's internal system was concerned, they were encrypted glass in a locked vault, and the vault didn't recognize its old masters anymore. At 1:12 p.m., Jenna sent a polite message asking if I'd be available for a quick Zoom to clarify archival procedures. I didn't delete it. I just stared at it for a moment and imagined how she must have felt. New job, big meeting looming, and suddenly realizing the woman they pushed out was the only person who'd left behind a working map. I clicked open my vendor dashboard, my version of the world they'd been shut out of, all logs intact. Audit trail clean, chain of custody unbroken, escrow vault ping stable. One field stood out. Restoration requests, pending 0. No one had formally initiated recovery, because to do that, they'd have to admit it wasn't just a glitch. It was sabotage, self-inflicted. And once you admit that, you've got to explain why. So instead, they scrambled. Pointed fingers, pretended the system would bounce back, but it wouldn't, because the only way back in was through me. And I wasn't walking through that door until someone with authority said the words no one in that company ever wanted to say, "We need her." Friday's emergency meeting was called for 8 a.m. sharp. Half the exec team didn't even have time for coffee. Good. Let them sit in it half-conscious. That's how most of them signed vendor contracts anyway. Marcus arrived early, sleeves rolled up, chest puffed like he thought this was his moment. He took the floor without waiting to be asked, pointing to a printed spreadsheet full of system gaps, most of which he didn't understand, and declared, "These irregularities stem from a breach in vendor protocol. We believe she, Marlin Advisory, compromised chain integrity by withholding documentation and escalating restrictions." I watched the clip later. Someone leaked it to me. The room was quiet until someone from legal, Deborah, sharp-eyed and twice as fast as the rest of the room, lifted her hand. "Let's pull up the vendor agreement. Original filing, not the summary." The projector lit up. Deborah scrolled, then paused on section 5.3, subsection D. Vendor retains sole control of compliance infrastructure unless breach is proven through formal arbitration or verified by a regulatory order. Internal action against vendor-owned systems constitutes a material breach of governance. She didn't add anything, just let the words hang. Then she underlined one line in red: sole control. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. The CEO, who up until that point had been clicking a pen with barely disguised irritation, leaned forward slowly. "Marcus," he said, voice measured, "did you authorize the inspection of a legally protected vendor system?" Silence. Marcus didn't blink, so the CEO turned to HR. "Did you?" Silence again. Then from the far end of the table, someone muttered what would end up being the most quoted line of the quarter. It was supposed to be internal housekeeping. A few heads turned. One exec even laughed, sharp and panicked, like he couldn't believe what he'd just heard. Deborah closed her laptop. "You broke protocol, escrow's been activated, and based on current system status, we're non-compliant for the audit window that opens in 8 days. Still, Marcus tried one last gasp of spin. There were signs she wasn't being transparent with documentation flow. "Are you referring to the folder marked, 'Do not modify escrow audit chain'?" Deborah asked. He hesitated. That's when the folder resurfaced. Someone slid it down the table like it was radioactive. A neat tab on the side read, "Tamper Log, Incident Report Archive." Deborah opened it, flipped 2 pages in, and turned the document to face the room. Each entry was time-stamped, each access attempt logged, each credential ID labeled. Monday, 2:08 p.m. Marcus, walters@company.com. Attempted to override node lock, failed. Monday, 2:10 p.m. Lisa.fairchild@company.com. Access attempt via HR override, failed. Tuesday, 9:41 a.m. ITadmin guest at company.com. Escalation privilege injection, blocked, reported. 3 full pages. All attempts had triggered notification relays to the external compliance partner, who, as of Wednesday, had placed the company's compliance status under escrow review, restricted. They'd not only broken into the vault, they'd sent the alarms straight to the regulators, and now they were locked out of their own audit system with no way to explain how or why, unless they wanted to admit the truth, that their jealousy over one woman's control over an invisible system had led them to saw off the only ladder holding their infrastructure together. And I was watching. From home. With my feet up, and my inbox full of panicked subject lines. By 8:11 a.m. Monday morning, the entire system interface greeted its users with a quiet blue screen and one line of text. Access denied. Vendor verification required. The buzz started in risk, then finance, then IT. By 8:40, it had turned into a full-blown internal wildfire. None of the exec dashboards were loading. The dashboards that pulled from real-time compliance logs, empty. The asset history queries, null returns. Even the sandbox environments built for simulations were flashing identical errors. One line looped across the bottom of every screen in soft, inoffensive gray font like it hadn't just pulled the brakes on the entire ship. Governance chain escrow locked. Consult vendor. Marcus tried to bluff it off, said it was probably a script hiccup, maybe an expired cert. But then Jenna tried logging in through the secure vault. No access. The external connectors were dead. The only backups available were 4 months old and flagged internally as incomplete. The very backups I'd warned them to stop relying on after we upgraded the compliance infrastructure. At 9:03, the new VP of Operations, Eli Harper, all swagger and buzzwords, the guy who once referred to my systems as legacy spaghetti, stormed into legal's floor demanding a rollback. said the vendor relationship was overblown, said compliance would be handled in-house moving forward. Deborah from legal didn't raise her voice, just turned her screen toward him and said, "You signed the authorization to inspect a protected vendor node without board consent. That's a breach of Custodial Clause 5.3d. The moment you revoked access without process, oversight defaulted to the vendor." He didn't get it. "You're saying we can't fix this?" he barked. She blinked once. "I'm saying you already tried, and now you don't have permission to try again." That landed hard, because even if they wanted to restore access, they couldn't. Not without going through me. And here's the twist that really singed their eyebrows. It wasn't sabotage, it wasn't even personal, it was structural. Everything they'd tried to steal, control, visibility, decision power, had evaporated the second they broke the rules written to protect them. And now, the same coworkers who whispered about how I guarded data like it was Fort Knox were the ones locked out in the cold. I heard from a former teammate unofficially that they tried to manually bypass the lock using old admin tokens from the archive system. That triggered a secondary block. The more they pushed, the deeper the lock rekeyed. They tried blaming IT, then they tried blaming legal, then they turned back to Marcus, who suddenly had no appetite for leading the next audit cycle. Meanwhile, the CEO got involved. Briefed late, furious, but careful not to make it worse. He asked one question: "What's the path back?" Deborah answered honestly: "We ask the vendor, and we wait." That's when it all shifted. Ownership wasn't a title anymore. It wasn't a badge, or a seat at the meeting, or a whiteboard full of strategic jargon. It was a single hardware token, sitting in a brushed steel safe. Quiet, undisputed, binding. And the people who once rolled their eyes when I logged off for lunch at 1:10 p.m. sharp, they now couldn't even read their own compliance reports without a permission slip from me. So when the banner flashed again across their locked-out screens, governance chain escrow locked, consult vendor, it wasn't a threat. It was a reminder. You can't steal what you don't understand, and you sure as hell can't control what was never yours to begin with. I let the silence do the talking. No callbacks, no email replies, no explanations, just time, unfolding like a sealed envelope none of them knew how to open. By the end of that week, legal had sent 3 separate emails, each more carefully worded than the last. Seeking clarification, urgent clarification requested, on behalf of the executive team, all of them trying to sound like they weren't begging. None of them including the phrase they needed most: "We were wrong." I didn't reply to any. Instead, I went analog. A small, unmarked envelope, hand-delivered. Inside, a basic USB thumb drive, black, no label, no instructions. The CEO received it directly. His assistant was instructed not to touch it. On the drive, one file. Restoration protocol.pdf, 12 pages. Clean formatting. My LLC's letterhead in the corner. Outlined the steps to reauthorize access to the compliance systems. Step 1. Full board vote authorizing reinstatement. Step 2. Joint signature from internal legal and Marlin advisory. Step 3. Escrow reset through external regulatory liaison. Step 4. 10-day revalidation period. Step 5. Audit log resynchronization and oversight reporting. It wasn't punitive, it was procedural, designed not for revenge, but for control. The CEO read it. Twice, I was told, then called an emergency board meeting that same night. He never reached out to me directly, didn't need to. The message had landed. The next week, Eli Harper, the shiny new VP of Ops who'd spoken so confidently about modernizing out old dependencies, was quietly dismissed. No big announcement, just a muted update in the internal HR portal. Position vacated, role under review. Marcus wasn't so lucky. He wasn't fired. They needed a scapegoat, but not a corpse. He was reassigned to a cross-functional workflow optimization team. Corporate exile with a different name. No more system access, no more compliance work. Just meetings with other displaced egos pretending to still matter. HR never spoke publicly about the search they'd conducted. No apology, no memo, but they didn't have to. Everyone in the building saw the dashboards when they finally came back online. Each one stamped with a new banner at the bottom. Compliance systems maintained in custodial partnership with Marlin Advisory Group LLC. Verified vendor oversight active. But the real nail, the email that leaked from our external regulatory liaison addressed to the CEO and CC'd to legal. As of this correspondence, your internal certification has lapsed due to breach of escrow protocol. Marlin Advisory's vendor certification remains active and verified. We strongly advise adherence to vendor protocol for restoration of audit clearance. That email made the rounds, quietly. But it moved like smoke through a room full of wires, because what they finally understood, what none of them wanted to admit, was that I hadn't just built the system. I'd licensed it, controlled it, and when they pushed me out, they didn't remove a nuisance. They removed the only person who kept the lights on in the room they thought they owned. And I never raised my voice, never threatened, never gloated, just watched the lock seal from the outside and waited for the knock. It started with a carefully worded message from the CEO's office. Not an apology, just a discussion opportunity. They framed it like a partnership, a way to ensure continuity and stability in key operational systems. Translation: they needed me, but they couldn't say it out loud without tasting blood. A week later, I sat across from the general counsel and the interim VP of Ops. The very chair Harper once occupied sat empty, polished, repositioned, but haunted. They slid over a folder: retainer agreement, consulting title, 6-month engagement with generous terms. Their eyes were hopeful, nervous, the kind of quiet desperation you only see in boardrooms after the storm. They used words like stabilize, realign, reintegrate. I used one word: no. Not cruel, just final. They blinked. May we ask why? The interim VP said, as if the answer hadn't been etched into every server error they'd choked on for the past 3 weeks. I slid over my version of the folder. A licensing agreement, strict, detailed, ironclad. Not for full system reintegration, just sandbox access. They'd get a mirror of the original compliance system, read-only pipelines, no escalation privileges, no internal modification rights. A live environment filtered through regulatory constraints, tied to quarterly audit checkpoints. Every report, every export, every update, reviewed and countersigned by Marlin Advisory Group LLC. Me, and it came with a fee. Quarterly, non-negotiable, billed in advance, late penalties apply. They could use the system, but they'd never touch the core again. There was a long silence after they finished reading. Not anger, just slow realization. A dawning understanding of what they'd done and what it had cost. They'd tried to bury me, now they'd pay me to use the dirt. The irony? Not lost on anyone in the room. Least of all Marcus, who passed me in the hallway after the meeting with a stack of audit logs tucked under one arm, pretending not to notice the new vendor approval required banner blinking on his dashboard. HR was now required to submit compliance event summaries for verification before onboarding any senior-level personnel. Finance had to forward their audit trails to a review portal that carried my firm's signature. And legal? They were stuck managing a contract that required external signature validation for any protocol change related to risk or data infrastructure. What they'd tried to hijack, they now had to rent. And I didn't have to raise a single voice memo, because the moment I declined that return offer, I stopped being an employee. I became an environment, one they had to maintain, one they couldn't afford to lose again. 6 weeks later, they still spoke in hushed tones when my name came up. I wasn't there anymore. Not in the building, not in the meetings, not on the org chart. But I was in every login screen, every compliance checkpoint, every audit trail ping that landed in someone's inbox at 2 a.m. The systems didn't run without me. They ran through me. Every terminal now bore the same line across the footer in sharp gray text. Compliance oversight managed by Marlin Advisory Group LLC, escrow-backed, no internal override permitted. No one could delete it. No one could edit it. It tried once, got locked out of the mirror system for 12 hours. Legal said not to try again. At the next all-hands town hall, the CEO stood under that same line, projected large on the screen behind him. He wasn't sweating anymore. He'd moved from damage control to damage admission. He cleared his throat, looked out at the room like a teacher deciding which kid broke the globe and glued it back crooked. This is what happens, he said slowly, when you treat infrastructure custodians like replaceable parts. When you ignore the hands that built the foundation you stand on. He paused. No one laughed. No one looked away. You don't cut out the system to spite the person. You respect the system because of the person who designed it. I wasn't in the audience. I watched from my home office, daylight sliding in across the wall. Coffee in one hand, my cat on the windowsill. Dashboard tabs open in the background. Slow, steady green ticks confirming that every system I licensed was running just fine. They could keep the office. The glass walls, the empty chair with my name quietly erased from the back of it, because they'd never erase the line that mattered most. Not on the login screens, not on the audit trails, not on the contract they never bothered to read. Property of Marlin Advisory Group, LLC. They searched my desk for dirt and ended up triggering a contract they never even read.